Hey everybody, it's the D100 and welcome to the bonus video of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. This is going to be a bit of a lengthy video, and this is going to be some things that I have actually been meaning to talk about her for quite a while. So, for this episode, a great way to end things off with the series. I think it's about time and then we'll be talking about some things that I never really have gotten the chance to really talk about. And what better way to start things off than, well, the title screen. Believe it or not, the title screen can actually vary depending on the time of day, and as you can see, the sun is already shining down through the window as it is. But what if I told you that this also is not the way on how the title screen would be like? At the beginning of the game, you would normally see this. You see a Pokeball that's on the Scarlet or Violet book, depending on what game you're playing, and the windows is shut. In order to complete this at a particular point in the game, where you have this particular title screen with this amazing background music, you need to complete everything with that of the Indigo Disc, the DLC. And I like to take a moment for having you to listen to this music, because it's very comforting. Isn't that just a very relaxing piece of music? What's really great is that there's practically no music in it at all before this point on the title screen, and it's honestly kind of disappointing. I wish it was like this from before, but I guess, to be fair, the way and how things were from before in the time of Scarlet and Violet's DLC when it came out, we had to find some ways getting through this. But now that we've kind of gotten done with all that, why don't we kind of do a little bit of some more lore on some things? And what better way to start off with, well, Uia Academy. Naria and Uia Academy has been around here for roughly 805 years ago. It is one of the largest schools that we have ever seen throughout the entirety of the series, if not the biggest. And if what we've learned throughout that in our history classes, we learned in it that it got through pretty much a lot of modern updates, and that still keeps it as it is even to this day. With, of course, bottom floor, middle floor, and upper floor on that. But curiously, if you all recall from what happened throughout the entirety of the story, we learned in that it definitely had a bit of a dark history as well. Around a year and a half ago, 1,800 months prior to the game's plot, we know that there was a director at the time named Harrington who pretty much just took the blame for when Team Star was on the rise. I'll get into more about Team Star a little bit later on, but I truly think that this is an academy that was trying to cover up its dark history, but I don't feel like it's entirely their fault. In fact, interesting, there's this unnamed particular director shaking hands with Harrington, and we can only assume that this was the person that was the director before Harrington, and then many years later, Harrington stepped down from his position and Clavel took over. A batch of new staff members, and it came to be to pretty much just help clear up all the misunderstandings that has happened, and honestly, I wish that things like this couldn't have happened. There's not a whole lot that really needs to be said about the Academy that hasn't already been said, but I'd like to make a little bit of a deeper lore to one of the classes. More specifically, in Professor Reichen's classroom, the history classroom. This man that you see in this picture that's right behind her right shoulder, that is Professor Lavington. He is an indie professor from that of Pokemon and Legend Arceus. He's actually kind of a staple first. The only known professor at this point whose last name technically isn't involved with that with trees, and yes, Professor Sada and Toro are basically the same, but this just kind of shows how much Rifle really cares about that of history. Well, we get more into Rhyhorn a little bit later, but that's not the only thing that we see. There's a Hisuian Pokeball, and that's right there, right next to Laventon's picture. What's interesting is that this is actually a reference to how Pokeballs are used to be made back in the old days. In fact, one of the big things, and we could truly make a reference on this, is the fact that what you were pretty much seeing right here is the first generation of a Pokeball, and Rhyhorn actually takes this sort of thing very seriously. If you guys remember Curtin from the second generation of the Pokemon series, well, he actually uses these particular kind of apricots, or rather apricorns, depending on what way you're looking at. He can actually make these into modern Pokeballs similar to the way how they were before, and just give them a better look. It's pretty cool when you think about it. But now we've finally gotten that taken care of, let's go ahead and start talking about our rival friends. Starting things off with Nemona, our very first friend that we meet. Believe it or not, it's not confirmed whether or not if Nemona actually was born and raised in Paldea. In fact, it is heavily implied that she wasn't. In fact, Nemona's character actually has some tragic in her life. A lot more than you think. We know that she came from a rather wealthy family, as she is the youngest daughter of a board member of the Rotom Phone Company. She does have an older sister, and both of them, for her parents, are teaching her everything about running the business by the time when her time comes. Nemona states, and while down in the Great Crater of Paldea, is that they pretty much allowed her to, quote-unquote, do whatever she wants. I think that actually wounded her more than you truly realize. In fact, if what I'm getting at is true, Nemona actually covers up all that pain for her being so energetically happy, and her love for battling kind of eclipses that. It is very likely a reference to something when they try to cover up that sort of feeling from a side effect from what is known as family estrangement. For those of you that don't know, family estrangement refers to the breakdown of relationship between family members, often involving a significant reduction or cessation of communication. I'm not going to say that she is a terrible person per se. What I'm saying is that she's very often ignored, as she pretty much just, quote-unquote, does whatever she wants. This wounds her more, and I think that heavily hurts her character more than you realize. While we're on the subject of this, I think I may have an idea for where Nemona could potentially be originated from. 2 potential locations, 3 if you want to try to go for a little bit more some technicality for that. Number 1, Johto. This is the very origin of where these particular communication devices started off as, But we also find out that over the years, they have definitely evolved in pretty much the same way as the way how we see them right now, as smartphones. The Pokegear, to be more precise, definitely falls into the description rather nicely, as it includes some of the things that this in a particular Rotom phone it has at the time. And it just evolved greatly over the years. And if her parents are board members, it would make sense that since this isn't where it all started, it could work out to knowing that, well, let's face it, kind of works out nicely. The second location where I think that she might be from is Alola. This is basically the origin of where the Rotom Pokédex is born from. And with the idea that a Rotom can actually work well with pretty much any device, it kind of works out pretty nicely. The one big thing that I really wish that the Rotom Dex really did have at the time is that if it had some sort of... Well, actually, it kind of does have it in the anime. But He can act as a bit of a communicator, but it's not really used often throughout that of the main game, though. So the idea of this and it being evolved with the idea sort of for such, and if her parents had came up with the idea of combining a Rotom into a phone that pretty much makes it into the ultimate smartphone, I truly think that this one will work out very nicely. The last location where I think where she could potentially be from is Kalos. I know this may sound like I'm kind of just grasping at straws at this, but hear me out for a moment. The fact that I think that she would come from that of Kalos could make sense. That, well, with the Legend of ZA coming out, we might actually get a little bit more of an origin story based around that of Nemona's character. I should probably take this time to point out that Nemona never refers to her parents as mother and father. Well, actually, she does refer to them as mother and father, but not madre and padre, which are basically the Spanish words for this. Curiously, this particular location doesn't have much of anything to do with the family business and with the idea of them with the evolution of the phones as it is, but if what I'm getting at is true, we could potentially see an origin of that where Nemona came from, as it is heavily implied that she might potentially be from one of these regions that, well, we might know a little bit of some things about. While we're on the subject of other regions, I want to quickly point out that it is canonically confirmed that Nemona has been headed to one other region, Unova. I briefly mentioned this in the Let's Play, but if you have both Nemona and Lacey in the very same league room at the same time, they will have a special dialogue between the two. Check it out. Oh, Nemona! It's been far too long. I don't think that we've met since that party, have we? Whoa! Lacey, right? Good to see you! I can't believe you remember my name from just that one time we met. That's awesome! Oh no, it's no more impressive than you remembering my name in return. Besides, how could I forget you? You creating such a stir, challenging my daddy to a battle right there in your fancy party dress? Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. Once I heard he was a gym leader, I just couldn't help myself. But Daddy was so pleased with you. Do you know what he said? Nothing wrong with a young missy who knows what he wants. Aww, I'm glad. Clay's very kind. So this proves that both Nemona and Lacey had a bit of a history with each other from a special get-together that was taking place in Unova. And speaking of such, are you ready to see the craziness of Nemona in another suit? This is what she looks something like in a Signa suit. This is only accessible when you are playing the game Pokemon Master EX. Kind of an interesting game. I never really played it before, but its story is actually kind of interesting, to say the least. You can meet up with so many other characters that are from past games and brought together. I personally get insecure of the Signa suit, and just looking at it kind of makes me think of him like a Dark Lord. Or even crazier, probably my personal favorite is Giovanni's Goozlord Signa suit. He looks darn impressive, especially since he can pull off any suit, but then again, Diantha's shiny Dion insignia is actually kind of cute. She could probably wear that to any ball if she wanted. There's a lot of dialogues that Nemona has with the other people in the big club, but I care more about this. A potential foreshadowing for her future regarding of how things will go down and for her being a champion rank trainer. I want you to listen to this quote between both Nemona and Geeta. Hola, Primera! You shook up your party, huh? Well, of course. I am the Primera after all. How could I set an example for other trainers if I don't keep pushing myself to become stronger? That checks out. I'd better keep up the pace, too. Well, I don't plan on slowing down until I hand over the role of top champion to you. Or to champion player, that is. No! Come on, Prima, don't talk about that. I'd rather just stay here Prima forever. If that's the case, it seems I won't be able to retire for a good while yet. This could potentially be a foreshadow that Nemona, even though that she just wants to remain as a champion rank trainer, Geeta actually has considered passing down her throne to Nemona. I personally think that her being a top champion is not only fitting for her, but at least I can safely say through this matter alone, her future is pretty much all secured. Her future is bright. She doesn't need her family business. She's a strong, independent woman. So now that we're done talking about Nemona, let's talk about Penny. Penny is a character that I think also got it pretty bad, but I think hers is a little bit more on the merciful side. In fact, what's really nice about Penny is that we actually know a little bit more of her own history. In fact, all of this stems from that to the prequel to the game of Sword and Shield. Penny's character dates all the way back from Galar in the stories of that of Sword and Shield. She's never shown in the game, but I did mention this from before, but she is the niece of the big bad head of Sword and Shield, Chairman Rose. Would you be surprised if I told you that she's one of the very few main characters in the series to have a full family? In fact, her father is Chairman Rose's brother, Fione. It is likely to assume that she has an older sister who goes by the name of Fionia, and there's also an unnamed mother that is also briefly shown in this game itself. We don't know much about her, but what we do know is that she is shown to be in a rare league card that is given to you from Fionia herself. I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing her name, but here, take a look. This shows that she does indeed have a full family, but where she's at in the events of Sword and Shield is unknown, but I think I may have a hunch for where she is and when she went there. The best possible range that I could think of for how long these two generations take place has to be between the years of 2 years and 4 years at the very most. According to what Harrison has told us after he defeated Ortega at the base of operations, we learned that Penny actually studied abroad from Galar here at Paldea. The true reason behind all this is not fully known, but what we do know is that Penny's actions with Team Star stemmed about a year and a half prior to this in the game plot. So it's likely to assume that she had been there for at least 2 years and was basically there just to try to begin anew with her life. Quite honestly, I think between the years of 2 to 3 years might actually be beneficial for her, because not only would she have more than enough time to start things with a new life, but we can also safely say that with the right motivation, she can help her create the Team Star that we know today. In fact, one thing that I can truly think about with Penny is that the bullying that she had gotten over the years stems from a mental disability that she may have. I think, in my personal headcanon, she might actually be autistic. Those with autism, speaking from someone with autism, their brains operate much differently than any normal person who could truly understand. In fact, it helps us to think and view things much differently that many psychologists believe that we definitely handle things much differently than ever. For Penny's case, it comes as no surprise that she's someone who just trying to adapt to a better life, and those that bullied her because of her autism definitely says a lot for how she is as a character. While we're on the subject of Team Star, Penny's creation of the organization was probably one of the best and one of the worst things that she's ever done. Under the codename of Cassiopeia, she had to find the right people to help out her with the cause, to help end the bullying, and pretty much just help heal those that have suffered the same pain as she went through. She was very picky on who to pick at first, because she wants them to help lead a group towards a better future. The Star Bosses were her first choices, but I think she was probably the most picky out of them all. In terms of the order that I think that was the first to be recruited was Eri. Eri has probably one of the biggest golden hearts that I've mentioned throughout the entirety of the series. According to what was revealed to us, Eri was bullied mainly because that the original queen of the academy at the time, named Carmen, harassed her, and other people started to get more involved in this. She even went out of her own way to ensure that Eri got it the worst. After too long, Penny had recruited Eri to help out with the creation of Team Star, and even suggested for her to help rebuild locations to help out with those and that can help make the group stronger, to have it be more ideal for people to heal in the process. In fact, ironically, not long after Carmen was bullied herself, after the bullies got tired of harassing Eri, she recruited Carmen, forgave her for everything, became some of the closest friends ever, and so much more. Eri's contribution to Team Star to help establish some of these basic operations and to help train other Team Star members to become stronger and more confident in themselves, while also having one of the biggest hearts of them all, says a lot for what she's done. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if Penny herself hasn't made Eri not only like the big sister of the entirety of the team, but as second in command in case if something were to go wrong and Penny was unable to continue on forward with the business. In terms of who I think came next was Giacomo. He was once the president of the student council, but he ended up coming up with student conduct policies that ended up being so ridiculous that he was forced out by the students and Nimona took his place. He got so humiliated and alone that Team Star pretty much salvaged him to become much better and to help out with the formation of Team Star. He ended up helping out with the creation of the Code of Conduct of Team Star, and this is something that they had to follow just to ensure that no one could do something stupid within the organization. In fact, one of the big things about that of the Code of Conduct is that all Team Star bosses that gets challenged to a battle, they have to accept the challenge. No exceptions. If they win, they keep their position as Team Star bosses. But if they lose, they are forced to step down. And I think this is something that Penny had intentionally used to her advantage with Operation Starfall. Quite honestly, I really think that Giacomo coming out with this Code of Conduct was probably one of the best blessings in disguise that also ended up being one that completely backfired on them. My guess on who came next was Atticus. Atticus was bullied for liking old-fashioned things, especially since one of the things that he favors is the Shakespearean English. In fact, I'm willing to bet you that he taught something like this a lot since his childhood. He claims that he came from a family of ninjas, but as a bit of a personal guess, it's not confirmed, but he might actually be a descendant of Koga and even Janine. In case if you don't remember, Koga and Janine were once proud poison-type gym leaders, with Koga being an Elite Four member for Johto. One of the coolest things when he did is that he ended up being the one to create the costumes for all the bosses. And one of the biggest things ironically, Even though that he thinks that mathematics are not important, his very contribution of creating these very creations for the star bosses is another one that made him so lovable. He fit in with Team Star so well that thanks to his artistry and creative thinking, he became very well liked. I think Ortega came next. It's unclear for certain as to why he was bullied, but I have a hunch. We know that he came from a wealthy family, and even the family owning a major apparel company right there in Paldea. The kid's a spoiled brat, and I think a lot of people bullied him solely because of him being, well, a spoiled, rich, punk kid. And my guess is that they bullied him so badly that it shot his pride, and it crippled him so badly. He joined Team Star, and curiously, Mr. Harrington, the former director before Clavel took over, is his piano teacher. His main contribution was to help out with the creation of the Starmobiles, which is kind of interesting to say the least. Kind of sounds like the Team Star bosses wanted to try to cheat their way, but honestly, why they chosen to create something like this is kind of a complete mystery. But my guess is that they did this solely because they want to try to be intimidating for those that want to try to bully them to continue on forward with their matters. The final boss that was recruited had got to be Mela. She was bullied in probably one of the dumbest ways of them all, to the point where even I think it's ridiculous. She wasn't bullied mainly because that the other girl from the academy were jealous on how cute she was. This got to her so badly, and because of her hot temper, even through that, they still consider her to be rather cute because of it. I guess if you don't consider her to be cute as a Barbie and to be this angry and cute at the same time, yeah, that would definitely get to her. How did she get back at them for that? She stopped wearing her uniform and actually went with her own style that made them all stop picking on her. Curiously, she is considered to be an all-rounder, fixing many problems that Team Star had to face, and she even went out of her own way to help many Targetettes evolve and to help empower the Starmobiles. Well, sort of. In fact, one Targetette in particular formed a strong bond with her, and even persuades her to at least let it continue to be a part of her life. Together, the five of them helped create a group of so strong and so populated that it's even gotten to the point where there have been some nasty rumors that have been spreading about them. And Penny, realizing this as one of her biggest mistakes, wants to take the blame for them so they can all safely go back to school and just put an end to it all. This plan backfired immensely. So bad, in fact, that she kind of went onto a bit of a failsafe. Operation Starfall. She had to find the right trainer to help get them out of this mess, and by the time when she saw us, the player, she set the whole thing in motion. To her credit, she wanted this to end, and she wanted everyone to live out a better life. If they refuse to do this, then what's the point? Penny loves her friends, even though that they have never met in person. Penny wanted to do this on her own terms. And finding the perfect way to end Team Star by using the code of conduct against them worked out in both the good way and even in a bad way. Because even Operation Starfall ended in probably the craziest way possible. It ended well, but it also was to the point for when she just couldn't say goodbye to her friends, and they didn't want to say goodbye to her at all. Had it not been for us, an injustice would have been made to a team that not only did not deserve this punishment, but they would almost have suffered the fate of being shunned for pretty much the rest of their lives. The five bosses really wanted to help change and to be better for the sake of Penny. Even going as far as to calling us for help, although maybe Ortega's kind of an exception to this whole matter, but the point is, the fact that they wanted to change for the better was to pretty much just help ensure that their friendship with Penny remained prestige. Quite honestly, when I did this for the first time, I was in tears. Penny not only has a future, but she has the perfect friends to help get her to where she is today. And like with Nemona, her future is pretty much set in stone. Arven's character, I think, was pretty much doomed from the start. I want to take this time to quickly point out that I have no ill will towards anyone who made this game, but what the hell, guys? Are you trying to make us feel worse with a character who's been with Arven since, like, the beginning? Okay, to Arven's credit, him being like this is nowhere near his fault. And I really like the guy. A lot of people who think that this is a guy that got crapped on so much since it was to the point where there was no return. But I think Arven's character, the way how he is from the beginning to the end, is not entirely his fault. When you truly think about it, I'm really thinking that Arven's character was definitely developed because of the neglect that he had from his parent. I want to quickly point out on one thing. It's not confirmed whether or not Sada and Toro were officially married. In fact, there are some cases in which that they are not implied. But on the other hand, because they take place in two separate universes of Scarlet and Violet, you could argue that they could potentially have been together. Just then the rules are flipped depending on where you're looking at. And quite frankly, the professors are the worst. But let's just assume for a moment that the former was the case, and if they were not together, then it might make sense in pointing out that Arven, even though that they heavily resembles more so of his father, there's no confirmation of this anywhere in the game. Heck, even in the last journal entry from that research lab, where if you were playing Scarlet, Sada would have said, that man who walked out with the boy. Whereas for Violet, it's reverse. And Toro would have wrote out that it was that woman who walked out with the child. Can you simply point out to the fact that this is a guy that neglected his parent all because of their ways of just focusing more on their job rather than their family? I think that the professors are being so intoxicated with their work is the true definition of a workaholic, if not more than that. And I think that it just improves so much of Arven's character from the start. However, that does not mean that it was all bad. He had the proper Pokemon that helped him get through life, and even went as far as to kind of skipping classes to save my boss Tiff's life. But what really killed him mentally a bit was Koraidon and Miraidon. I think it would have been from around that point was from when Sada/Toro have met their demise. But what has become of the other parent? I think we can safely say that a divorce may have happened at the very least. And to kind of get back at the professor into thinking that they could have a change of heart, they would be the one to be taking child custody of Arven. It would make sense if that one was the case, but the problem that I had with that was, how the heck did they manage to get Arven to school and all that? Well, I think that's quite simple. They pretty much just kind of set him for life when it comes to classes, but I think you all can kind of tell where this is going. But I think I can safely say that I would consider both Sada and Toro as the perfect contenders as the worst professors in the entirety of the series. Even worse than some of the more minor characters and that we see throughout, like spin-off games, or pretty much anything that has any sort of connections into the series. Even the AI that they created, based around the very memories and personality of the professors, even it was not aware of the professor's true intentions. They created the failsafe to ensure that the time machine continues, and to make matters worse, the actual AI is the main power source and that it didn't even know about. Protection from Paradise Protocol was probably the last biggest mistake that the professors have made. They wanted the time machine to keep going, and we were pretty much just caught in the middle of it, putting their own son in danger to the point where even he could potentially be suffering the same fate. Koraidon and Miraidon being with the player at the time kind of helped save Arven's life. And if you don't believe me, read through all the entries that were right there in Area Zero and just reflect on everything that the professors have done to keep this very protection plan going. Like I said, Arven's future was pretty much doomed from the start, and now I can safely say that the professors are at fault on this. Had we not stepped in, Paldea could have been doomed, and it would have all been the professor's fault. And the only real way how to truly contain the threat was to pretty much just do things the hard way, to the point where I might have to call in some serious world-class champions. So let's assume here for a moment that if Sada and Toro were indeed in a relationship, I think from the start, they would have worked out nicely. But the issue that I have with this is that one would definitely have gone to the point where they would be corrupted from the start. If a divorce did happen, the one that to the left of Arven for the professor in the game, depending on which version that you're playing, would have also have made a big mistake as well. Little did any of them realize that of what the fate hinted of what truly would happen. There's no confirmations about what had happened with Arven's other parent, but I can take a wild guess in that they either have left the region to basically kind of begin anew and let the professor be taught a very important lesson and let them watch over Arven. But on the other hand, why didn't the other person just take Arven in? In fact, if this was Scarlet and if Toro were to take Arven would have had a better future, and the same rules will apply in Violet that Sada would to take Arven in, and they would have a better future as well. But even from that alone, I still think that if they are focusing on the same research, the latter professor would have a little bit more self-control and more self-aware of what's going on. I think that they would still have the respect that Paradox Cyclozar, but only for a better cause, to help bring an end to the corrupted divorcee with their problem. Of course, at the end of it all, they would still find out that professor had died. I truly think that Arven, despite the outcome, he would probably have a better life one way or another. But there is still one thing about Arven that I still want to ask. Does he truly feel complete? Or does he perhaps not know if he has truly moved on? Well, the answer to, I think, for any of those questions would be a bit of a yes and no. Hear me out. Arvin never really knew his parents. He only ever lived alone, and the only real thing that he had and that helped to remind him of his parents was the Paradox Cyclozar, Miraidon or Koraidon. This is something that I've been wondering for a while now, but I think that character development was pretty much complete after everything that had happened in Mochi Mayhem, and even through some special dialogue that Arvin would have at the League Club room. He not only found his true passion in life, but he even found out where his future lies. He's not continuing where his parents had left off. He found his own destiny. And had it not been for us stepping in and even healing Mabosstiff, I truly think that he never would have found peace. If he never found peace, then, well, he would have been doomed either way. However, his time wasn't as bad. The dude was a freaking genius! He managed to get to school well. He probably got top marks in pretty much many subjects up until for when Mabosstiff got into this injury, God knows how long ago. But even from that, Arvin continues to impress me with every playthrough. It really gets us into more and more information and detail about the guy the more times you play this game. Arvin, if you really put more into this, he could start his own pathway as his own professor. Studying the Urban Mystica, maybe learning how to harvest it, or even better, try to figure out more about what to do with the trust legation that his parents have learned from before, and maybe convert it in a way that it could be beneficial and health caring for Pokemon. He doesn't need them. He can get inspirations from them, but at the end of the day, he's his own person. While his future may still be in question, I can truly say that he is in the right hands, and life for Arvin is getting better pretty much every day. Okay, before we kind of go any further, I want to make a quick add-on here to this part of the video. While doing the editing, I realized that I unintentionally have been calling the staff members their professor. I did it mainly out of an impulse. So, that's technically not really the case. But, whoops. There's only 2 professors at the Academy that I actually really do want to take a moment to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is Ryford. It is confirmed that she is indeed a criminal. She even admitted this when she was at Blueberry Academy while talking to certain NPCs, like Jack, being potentially a candidate for a sacrificial ritual. It's unclear for certain as for what she did in the past, but I think I may have a hunch of 2 potential possibilities. Number 1, she might have been at one point been a part of Team Cypher. In case of you aren't aware, Team Cypher is the crime organization of Pokemon Coliseum and XD Gala Darkness. If that was indeed the case, I was thinking that she could have gone after pretty much any Pokemon that isn't based around Legends. In fact, any of them could have been the perfect candidate. But I think probably the one that would make the biggest sense would have been the legendary Titans. And if not for the failsafe, the Eon Duo. The fact that any of those trios of Pokemon, or in this case, group of Pokemon that would have fit the description for that, would have brought the world to their knees. And even worse, if they managed to get their hands on the Weather Trio, they could pretty much just kiss the entire Orate region at the very least goodbye. Because not only would they be tampering with the weather, but they'd be perfect and ancient Pokemon that Ryford would have potentially have rounded up perfectly. For my second guess for what she could have potentially have done as a criminal was exploiting the history of Sinnoh. More specifically, Hisui. And if you've been paying attention, Hisui is referenced a lot in her classroom. In fact, the things that I talked about from before are right there. I think when it comes to Ryford, she would definitely want to know more about the ancient stories of that it dated back all the way from the time of Hisui, and pretty much just claim it as her own. Pretty much just ruining a lot of the portion of history, and just be all like, use it into her own liking. In fact, if what I'm getting at is true, she could be just as insane as the super final boss in that of the entire game. I think that Ryford and Volo would have been a great partnership to work together on this. Gaining all of the plates, harnessing the power of the Creation Trio, and even exploiting Arceus' powers as well, that might be seen as someone who's worth paying attention to, especially for that of Interpol.
You hear that, Carlos? We got a target for you.
The last person I want to talk about is Time. Believe it or not, she's actually someone that we know a little bit more of a history about. She used to be the Rock-type gym leader at Montenerva before she officially stepped down and her sister Rhyme took over. Why she ended up resigning was because she wants to focus on more of being a teacher rather than just focusing on that being a gym leader. When she officially stepped down is unknown, but my guess is that it happened from around the time from when all those rumors of Team Star began to happen, and she ended up stepping in as the new math instructor, fitting in the description of this perfectly. She really does not like talking about it because she does miss being a gym leader, but she knows that the position that she once had is in good hands. I would say that she's very insecure about this despite her happy personality, but the fact that she's even like this from the beginning says a lot for how she developed as a person. In fact, she's confirmed to have a deceased father and an unhidden name and these are grandnephews. She's a grandmother, which is really, really cool to say the least. The only real thing that kind of is going to talk about something that makes it kind of dark is the fact that both Rhyme and Time, once it had a puppy Pokemon that passed away during their teenage years, and the fact that we can learn more about the history, especially with Rhyme, she has a dark story. The last topic I want to talk about for Paldea are the 10 sites of Paldea. I'm not going to cover all of them, as I already did cover a little bit of them at the time, but I will cover the ones that I think are probably the most eye-grabbing. Every single one of these locations are based around real-world inspirations. The one that I want to talk about, probably the one that a lot of people seem to think is the coolest, is the Million Volt Skyline. This is taking place in Valencia, and this is based on the sprawling port city of Valencia in eastern Spain. The skyscrapers that you see along the edge of the city draws from the inspiration of that for the Valencia Skyscraper Center. Really kind of goes to show what the developers really can do once they really try to grab people's attention of where you can find them. The one that I think really sticks out more of a sore thumb is Paldea's highest peak. The one for that Glacia and Montenerva are around. It draws inspiration from the Pyrenees Mountains that are linked between Spain and France. In fact, what's interesting is that the architectures that we see throughout Montenerva are both depicting traditionally medieval style townhouses and cottages. Keeping it old fashioned, but keeping it cool nonetheless. With Paldea completely out of the way, I think it's high time we talk about Kitakami. Kitakami is in a region that not many people seem to be aware of where it's at. According to what I was able to find, It's in a location that's in between that of Kanto and Sinnoh. And in case any of you aren't aware, Kanto is more connected to that with the Japanese in the world, and Kitakami seems to be sharing some of those same features as well. I like this idea of Hana more than most. In fact, one of the biggest things that what I love about Kitakami is that they're all similar to how things go down in Japan in the real world. The one that I wanted to talk about more is that of the Kitakami Festival of Masks. It is based on a real life event of the Tohoku region of Japan. They draw inspiration from festivals and traditions found in the Iwate, Ikate, and Inamori prefectures, including the Tawana Himamaji National Park. Honestly, the fact that they even go as far as in giving us a special type of tradition that only happens at certain locations in Japan is so cool and inspiring for us all on that. Oni Mountain is the biggest attraction that we see here throughout that of Kitakami. In fact, Oni Mountain has a bit of a lore that had transferred by that from all the way back from Pokemon Legend Arceus, and has even made it to the way into the modern game as well. Oni Mountain is based on Onigashima, in translation to that of Ogre Island. All of this is depiction from the Japanese folktale of Momotaro. The island itself is said to once have been inhabited by ogres and is often depicted as a mountain or island with a humanoid shape. Kind of similar to the way on how the mountain itself kind of makes it look like it has features representing a nose and two eyes, how it looks kind of human-like. Momotaro is a well-known hero from the story that journeys to this very island with his faithful companions, a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant, to defeat the ogres. The fact that Ogerpon herself is a representation of the ogres that are from that very island says a lot about how the story goes through with it all. In fact, the ogres were said to be the main bad guys, but in this game, it's reversed. Plot twist! This is something that I really love about how the developers are trying to give us some big twist and that we see from a folk tale that is so well known in certain cultures, and pretty much just made it into so where the main victim was the main good guy. And now let's get into the kids of the series. Starting off with Carmine. Carmine? A lot of people have been saying that she's one of the most annoying characters in the game, but she stated that she's an excellent. Someone who's still considering herself to be a kid, but his appearance is that of a teenager. In fact, I would probably say that she would have to be, at the very earliest, 15 years old. Kind of nice when she kind of behaves like that, but there's more to this. Carmine's character might actually be a reference to what is known as her being a narcissist. In case you aren't aware, a narcissist is when a person has an excessive interest in or an admiration of themselves. She boasts a lot about her appearance and her beauty, and it even states that if something goes wrong, she'll use her beauty to entice others. In fact, this is something that I feel like she's emotionally manipulating others into doing so. An explorative behavior, if you will. I mean, seriously, if there's one thing about how Carmine that you really do not know what to do, if she gives you this look, run. Another big topic about how Carmine that I've been noticing is in that she's also someone who might just be a reference to one who is also a tsundere. For those of you who aren't aware, a tsundere is a person who initially appears cold, aloof, and even hostile, but gradually becomes a lot warmer, friendlier, and even affectionate sometimes. We see this side of her a lot from the beginning of the Teal Mask, mainly because she just gets so agitated within her hometown of being a tourist attraction, and it's soon hitting to the point where she's pretty much become so cold to other people that it's almost impossible to try to reason with her at first, just to get her to calm down. The only real way on how one would truly open up more to that sort of thing is it when you spend a little bit more time with her and let her open up to you, the player. And, well, if that becomes to the point of where she softens up even in the later portion of the game, kind of fits the bill rather nicely. One thing that I've noticed is that I think Carmine might have actually developed a feeling for Arven. There's really no evidence to prove it on this, but this conversation that I had with the two of them in the League Club actually kind of gives us some telltale signs. This shows that over the course of the time that they met during the events of Mochi Mayhem, Carmine might have grown quite attached to Arven. You hear that, girls? You guys got competition! Just as long as she keeps that narcissism aside in check, I think these two could actually work out in the end. Better than with Drayton, if you know what I'm saying. And now we get into Kieran. And oh boy, this kid definitely has issues. We learn that he is indeed 14 years old, according to the French translations of the game. But we know that he also went through some teen angst, but even from that age, he shouldn't be going through that much issues, right? Wrong. I've done a little bit of some digging, and looking further into his character, he might actually be the embodiment of 4 out of the 7 deadly sins. The ones that I will not count are lust, gluttony, and sloth. Going into the order that I think it would best to describe him perfectly would be this. Envy. It's similar to jealousy and their feelings towards someone's trait, status, and abilities, as well as on the rewards they get in the end. Kieran was often seen as shy, but he's always wanted to have so much more glory that even Carmine was pretty much like a stage mom for him, and just kind of commanding him to do whatever she needs him to do. But he never had that chance to really express it. It would not have been until when he learned about our interaction with Ogerpon, is it when not only did we meet the ogre herself, but he really wanted him to see this to the point when it really started to get to him. We planted the seed from within him. The next stuff that I want to talk about is greed. It's basically just another that of rapacious desire and pursuit of material possessions, for the sake of temporal things. He wanted so much. He wanted him to be strong. The way and how he was going through with all that, especially since he just wanted him to have Ogerpon for himself, a selfish act, but it's definitely something that's worth showing for greed. He wanted it so badly that just only watered the seed more inside of him. The next one is wrath. It's just simply another word for rage. Inordinate and uncontrolled feelings of hatred and anger. I find it so fascinating for Kieran on how he hates us for not only stealing so much of that for what he wanted, but we pretty much kind of ignored how he'd been really feeling about this whole thing. Thanks, Carmine. Carmine definitely did a lot of damage, but I think everything else was done by us, the player. How we pretty much just took so many things from him, and it was now to the point for when his rage wasn't enough to feel such powerful darkness from within, and even Ogerpon herself saw that from within him. In fact, those are the 3 that I talked about from before were enough for the Loyal 3 to actually be resurrected and that her rage was perfect for them. And last, and the one that I get seen a lot, especially in the Treasure of Area Zero, is pride. Easily the most serious of the 7 deadly sins. It is in believing that one is essentially better than others, failing to acknowledge the accomplishments of others, and excessive admiration of the personal self. So in other words, that pride swallowed everything up about how he once was, and even bottling up so many emotions that he had in the past, and it was now pretty much to the point for when he's now pretty much just shown him to be a coward behind a mask of it all. After we put him in his place twice, he finally realized of the errors of his ways, and pride was pretty much the one that needed him to be destroyed. It wasn't easy, but after he finally gotten through with all of the sins that he had done, he dedicated pretty much the rest of the game to actually correct the wrongs that he has done, to try to be forgiven. The reason why I didn't include sloth, gluttony, or lust, it means that it had nothing really to do with him specifically. Although I could say that lust was probably a little bit more for Carmine, but hers was a little bit more stable on that one, and she's able to better control that. But yeah, gluttony is just a mean to go down or swallow, pretty much a huge amount of portions of food of them all. Sloth basically talks about physical laziness, spiritual laziness, and emphases, or pretty much anything that's like that of an actual sloth. And lust, well, I guess you could say that his lust and desire to become a champion, to be the most powerful in the academy, would probably fit the description well. But I don't think he showed off much of that. But pride definitely took over that perfectly. Briar's character is probably the one that I think involves in probably one of the best and also one of the worst ways. We learned that she is a descendant of Heath, the original editor of the Scarlet and Violet book, as she possesses the original book. She's a teacher at her Blueberry Academy, but it's unconfirmed for what classes she teaches. I can think of 2 positions in that she could potentially be working as. Either as a biology teacher or as the history teacher. Personally, I think that the history teaching position is perfect for her. The one thing that I think that describes her so well is in that her lust and desire to continue on with Heath's research and storytelling is what truly makes her one of the most corrupted characters in the game. I say this because in the events of the Indigo Disc, after finally getting permission to go down into the Area Zero, she pretty much just goes insane of finding research, document, and pretty much everything that Heath had saw, and eventually created her own volume book that expressed more of that research and that she had found. The one thing why I say that makes her corrupted is that she also puts us, the player, in serious danger because of this, and even fails to realize of Kieran's behavior after his defeat. In fact, now I'm also kind of thinking about it a little bit more. Remember that volume that she created and that we eventually gave to the professor before their demise? Well, believe it or not, she's the source on how this bootstrap theory started to happen. Upon creating this volume, we're pretty much just starting the first phase of this theory, and it was later learned that this particular volume was referenced in one of the very last notes that the professors left behind in the Underdepths, specifically saying that a young child presented to us a white volume. So not only was she involved in this so much, but she unintentionally set things in motion for the professor's fate in the end. And finally, the last character we'll be talking about in this game, Serrano. Serrano is a character that is full of mystery, but here's what we do know. He originated from Unova, and what's really cool is that this proves that he is indeed from Unova, as every single one of his team members is from Unova, including the 3 starter Pokemon. From his youth, we know that he also befriended Clavel when they were studying at a university, but it's unclear for where specifically. If I had to take a wild guess, he probably had studied either at a University of Unova or maybe perhaps out in Paldea. The reference to where any of that is unknown, but it's just a hunch. In fact, he often refers to Clavel as Valley, and because of this. If you also notice that on his hand, he has a ring on his 4th finger, implying that he is married. Who he's married to is unknown, but that's just another for speculation. But the one thing that really stands out to him is that he pretty much built Blueberry Academy itself, as he is the founder and director. The cost of which, where he made such a thing, must have been astronomical. Like, I'm willing to bet that you hundreds of billions of dollars to make this happen. But I don't think he did this alone, though, however. I think he must have had help from another location. And I can think of no other better location to help him up with this very project than with the Ether Foundation from Alola. And, well, as you know, the Ether Foundation is probably one of the most important locations in Pokemon lore, as it's more or less of a rehabilitation of abused Pokemon to be returned back to the wild, but they also give out probably millions upon millions of dollars to keep the facility going, and its growth and success, and it helps spread all over that of Alola, really says a lot about how much this academy can really be influenced from it. In fact, I think the Ether Foundation, with the use of its advanced technology, might have been responsible for helping him create some of these things and what we see today. In fact, I think the Blueberry Academy might actually be based off of the headquarters itself that we see in Alola. Where it's at specifically is unknown, but I'm willing to bet you that Serrano made sure that it was close to one of the mainland, so either between that of Unova or Alola. As you know, Unova and Alola are based around that of the states that we see in the United States of America. I guess you could also count Ori as well, since it is technically connected to it, but that's kind of beside the point. The point is, hundreds of billions of dollars that were put into this very academy really says a lot for his determination. How he managed to accomplish something like this is insane. And yet, ironically, he has a bit of a forgetful memory. Maybe just old-timers are just starting to get to him or something. I don't know. When it was properly built is unknown, but we do know is that it was fully established in recent years in the Universe oceans. So it's likely to believe then that it was built close to Unova. The one thing that I think that what truly helped to make this all the more plausible is that the Ether Foundation, and even those with that from the mainlands of Unova, had the help from the Pokemon that we see from the ocean floor. Now, as I said, none of this is confirmed, but it is pretty cool. The one thing that I will say that it is got the inspiration from that was from that of the Dragon Palace from the Japanese folktale Urashima Taro. The Dragon Palace is described as being an underwater and having a garden where scenery from all 4 seasons could be seen at once, and the terrarium fits into the description perfectly, with all 4 biomes that are from that of winter, summer, spring, and fall. It's really cool how you will be able to find something like this so well that even if you don't happen to look more into this sort of matter, it really gets into your mind wondering as to how this sort of thing was made in the first place. But in the end, the Academy is functioning perfectly. Life is getting hit better for future Pokemon trainers from not only Unova and Alola, but at the very least, Paldea as well. And that, everyone, is what I wanted to talk about from the entirety of Scarlet and Violet, including the DLC. This was a long run, and I'm just really glad that it's finally over. Thank you all so much for watching. I know that a lot has happened over the course of this Let's Play, and there was definitely some unforeseen events in it that even I couldn't avoid. But I'm really glad that you guys stuck it out with me to the end. And I hope that this bonus video was a little bit something of your interest. I'll see you guys in a little more than a couple weeks as we get into a franchise that I have never played before, but it does involve the data of a series that I am all too familiar with this particular channel. And I'm pretty much everyone else who has ever played this game before who has ever played a Nintendo game. And I'll see you guys next time.